Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So, talking about these density dependent and density independent limiting factors, these factors that are going on both from an abiotic as well as a biotic standpoint that control or at least affect the way populations grow, really is ultimately going to be that suite of resources, the suite of traits in an ecosystem that ultimately determines how big a population can actually get in that area. And so, what we're going to talk about today is this idea of carrying capacity. What is the maximum population size that an environment can support based on the available resources and the set of circumstances that exist within those limiting resources in an ecosystem? There can only be so many organisms that an environment can actually have enough resources to support. So when we look at population growth from that standpoint, we really sort of end up getting these two major patterns based on the amount of available resources. So when we look at a exponential population growth, right, where basically the population is doubling or at least multiplying by a consistent factor at a consistent rate of time, you end up getting what is sort of called this idea of a J-shaped curve, right? Exponential growth. It's rapid population increase due to the fact that there's just an overabundance of resources. If I take something like COVID and take a look at the fact that it needs a set of available hosts that it can infect and replicate within and then get passed to the next person, COVID is a great example of exponential growth because we're talking about a brand new virus. So nobody in the human population has a immunity for it, has a way to stop it, at least not initially. So that virus just spread like wildfire because it had a consistent supply of hosts to move from one infected person to the next. Take a set of organisms like the stink bugs or the lanternflies and move them into a brand new environment so long as the abiotic factors are okay and they've got available food sources and there's no predators that are going to come after them. Of course, their population growth is going to exponentially increase. It's going to grow and reproduce without really many barriers. And so their population just doubles and doubles and doubles at a very consistent rate because they've got enough food and nobody is coming after them, nobody's eating them. And the other abiotic factors, the temperature, climate, that sort of thing, is conducive enough for them to be able to survive and reproduce. Logistic growth is much more tangible as a sort of steady population. So logistic growth kind of looks like this S-shaped curve, where initially where that population may have gotten introduced for the first time, you do see a period of exponential growth, but then it sort of levels out at the top. Whatever that top might be, that carrying capacity, it has been met. And so that population's growth will slow down and sort of teeter up and above this carrying capacity line, where sometimes it'll overshoot it a little bit, and then it'll get forced to be corrected because they're running out of resources. They'll sort of undershoot, um, and now the resources become a little bit more plentiful. They'll overshoot again and get corrected by overusing their resources. And so if we sort of just take the average of those under and overshoots, you get this sort of relatively flat line at that carrying capacity where there really isn't any growth or depression of that growth over long periods of time. And this is at the point at which the population is now facing its limited resource, whatever that is, food source, shelter, um, a whole suite of things is more likely. So when we look at this, right, here's that exponential growth curve. It's only going to get there until it hits whatever its carrying capacity is. And then it will end up more like this S-shaped curve, this logistic curve, where it'll teeter around that carrying capacity as it is over predating perhaps its prey species, prey dropped off, they start dying off until they are below that carrying capacity again. The prey species can kind of rebound a little bit, and so now they can allow that population to get a little bit bigger. They overshoot again, and so you often have a lot of this interspecific competition, predator-prey reactions going on. And again, if we sort of level out or average out these under and overshoots, that's where you get that line that is that carrying capacity. So no population is ever directly at that carrying capacity at all times. They're constantly over and undershooting it, but again, if you average it out over time, that's where they'll sort of land the maximum number of individuals that that environment can support based on competition and predation, available food sources, so on and so forth. A lot of those density dependent factors play a role in where that carrying capacity level ultimately lies.